IFBB Pro, Thomas Lenihan. You got my boy, Manager Mike over here once again.
Thanks for joining the show, Thomas.
No problem.
Yes, sir. But so we've already been chatting a little bit, catching up on a few things. Thomas and I, we've not been in the same class, but we've competed in a lot of the same shows over the years. We're both a little older. I'm 40, he's 42, so we've been in the game for a minute.
Been around, yes.
Yeah,
especially the bodybuilding game.
Yeah.
Right? Yep.
Speaking of the bodybuilding game, this right here, this is your pro debut, you said?
Yep, 212 pro debut at the New York Pro. Yep.
Right on. How did that go for you?
Flat. But I was conditioned.
You look good.
I was conditioned. I was flat. It was me and Aceto over dieted, in my opinion, and he agrees. We could have been fuller, probably 5 to 6 pounds fuller in there. The conditioning was spot on, but conditioning doesn't win pro shows only. So I need to be fuller, I need to be more muscle to actually fill the frame out for my debut. But, you know, I made a top 10. I beat some names you guys know. And then I wasn't happy with that debut, so I wanted to go do the Chicago Pro. Right, you know, oh gosh, a couple months after maybe, and I said, Chris, I need to be fuller. Conditioning's not an issue with me, and so we just decided to eat a lot more food. I can eat a lot of food anyways because of my metabolism, so I prep on a lot of food, and the food just kept going up and up and up, and I was like going into the Chicago Pro, and the look was better. Surprisingly, my upper body was fuller than my lower body. It's never that case in the Chicago Pro, but I improved just a couple places, beat a lot of guys you know too, and lost a lot of good guys. Mark Dugdale won that show.
Yeah, dude, Mark coming up, that was one of my favorite bodybuilders.
I love Mark Dugdale. He was great to get, just a good guy to follow in the sport.
For sure, and especially guys of our stature, our height.
Yes.
Like, he was somebody we could, like, aspire, right?
He was aesthetic, conditioned, his physique made sense, it flowed, and you know, there was a lot of guys, international guys at that show. I can't even remember that. Tricky Jackson was the name, remember? Ricky Tricky?
Yeah, is that the New York Pro you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the Chicago. Chicago Pro, Guy won that. Guy won the Chicago Pro, of course. East Coast won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at that show. It was pretty wild because it was.
He's not competing anymore, is he?
No, he's retired too.
Yeah,
he's done. I mean, but he looked good. I mean, me and me were both coached by Aceto, so we're both backstage, you know, hanging out and doing our thing. And you guys don't want to hear this, but we were drinking our Diet Cokes because we don't think like everyone else. Because Aceto's like, you guys got to keep drinking your Diet Cokes. We're not cutting this out. You guys are absolutely shredded. So,
because you've had it in your diet up to that point. I love Diet Coke.
Yeah, we don't complicate it, and we were being, you know, we were dry and. Cheers to a Diet Coke. People don't get it backstage because they think, you know, it's only done one way, right? And when you know your body at that point, it's not going to impact you. I was dry. Nothing was going to change that at that moment, you know. And he looked phenomenal. I don't know how he pulled it off because he had his brother was getting married. He was the best man. So he had to, after prejudging, he had to go to the wedding, put a suit on, come back to finals in his suit. Obviously, he tanned right through his suit. He did this for his family because it was out in Bear, and he still won. This guy and he still wins. Yeah, but he looked great, you know. And Sean Corridia was in there. I think he was top 5. All those. You would know all that. You know the top 15 there.
Yeah. What did Sean look like back then?
Smaller.
Yeah.
He wasn't as. He was. You could see the Dexter Jackson look in him eventually. Okay. You know, it doesn't make sense when you see him up close, right? Because he has all this muscle, and he weighs not what we weigh,
175 or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end, he was in the 160s, right?
Okay.
And then he looks like he weighs more than a lot of us. It's insane. Seeing him up close, like, I was like, how is his bicep? It just doesn't make sense. Like, he's so dense, you would think it looks 210, right? But it's not. Then he was a lot smaller. Like, now what we see is it's nuts to me.
Sure.
To see him, but you could see it then because he was top 5 there, you know, so.
Yeah, I remember when I met Flex Lewis in person, the dude looked like he's 250. He's like, I'm 205.
Exactly, yeah.
It's crazy.
My point is it was wild because when I saw him up close, I'm like, man, he's going to be unbelievable. Like, not just because you don't weigh that much, but when you're 5'2", whatever you are, you look like you weigh a lot, you know, and his shape was beautiful. I mean, his roundness to his muscles, and it was great. He just needed more of it. He only need 10 more pounds on his body. He looks like, and he wins everything, right?
Sure.
And he places top 5 at open shows, weighing under 180. It's insane.
Yeah. I don't know how old he is. It seemed like he digressed a tiny bit this last year.
Yeah, I think
his midsection, a little distended, right?
Yeah, I believe he tried to chase more size.
Okay.
And his stature doesn't want that, so it pushed out. And I think he knows that. He does know that.
Yeah, and not to take anything away from him, because that's the problem. You look so good over and over and over. So if you're off by 2%, people are like, oh,
I know.
you know, there it is.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I
he
mean?
looks. His condition was nuts, but you were right. His waist didn't look the same. His abdomen looked a little distended, or it looked bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't need that. He's already the top guy at 212. So he'll come back and get the title next year. I bet he does.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Keon looks great, but I don't know.
I just felt like they chose that look rather than
They did.
It's just like, what do you want that day? Right?
Yeah, it kind of, you felt, because Sean was more conditioned, right? You know, but the shape of Keon was awesome. It was beautiful. I mean, you got freaky 212 and conditioning big too, and then you got beautiful flowing 212, not as conditioned, but because of the shape, the condition looks like it. It looks better.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a hard time with it. I was like, wow, Sean looks great, but there was something wrong with his waist, I thought. But I was like, nah, they may not fall. He's a champ, right? Mm-hmm. And he's still equally as conditioned, but then you look at Keon, and he has the lines. He's got the separation. His conditioning might look a little less, but his shape overcomes. And honestly, he fills more space on the stage. He does. He weighs more, so you can see that in that. You can actually, he just takes up more space. It's still a bodybuilding show at 212. It is still a bodybuilding show in the open. Like, you still want to cram as much as you can in muscle, right? And you want to take up space on the stage. Even though these 212 people, they think it's conditioning. No, we want to be freak 212 guys.
Right, right.
It just Keon shape flows, and he's aesthetic.
Well, he turned pro as a physique competitor, right?
Yeah, it's a
Classic physique, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then he grew into the
and
212.
He's like a classic 212 look, you know, with
Exactly.
more size, you know, and
Yeah.
and they gave it to him this year. I was I was shocked, but not, you know, because I saw Sean looking not as good as he did last year, right? So
Okay.
just by a little bit. And this, if you want to, like you said, we're pulling just at his stomach.
It'd be super critical.
Yeah, super critical.
But, I mean, at that level,
yeah.
that's what you get.
That's
You
what-
know what
yeah,
I mean?
so I
You're
know.
on the biggest stage in the world.
Yeah.
People are going to be critical of you.
Yeah.
That's just what it comes with the territory.
No, 100%. Like I said, like this, you know, at national level, like I'm not nervous of anything. Like I'm not
yeah,
scared.
dude,
but
smoke 'em.
the pro level, like, oh my Lord, you can't. Flatness matters, right? And fullness matters. It matters. In state levels, amateur levels, like, you can get away with a lot, right? And still win because you're just overpowering. Every pro up there is, you know, you're going genetic versus genetic at that point, right?
Right.
I mean, you are levels of genetics, and we all have different ones. And obviously, the guy with the best genetics who works equally hard as us is going to beat us, you know, unless he's not, right? Guy, he's an outlier. I don't think he had the best genetics, but like, I mean, he turned pro as a middleweight. I turned pro as a light heavyweight, so I was already closer to the 212. Yet he smoked my butt there, right? So, that's what, you know, gave me a little fire. Like, God, okay, so I got to take this to Chicago now. But and I like my look at Chicago. Like, I like the fullness, but I still think I could have been a little sharper there. But I improved placings, so that was the idea.
Have you ever hit stage and been completely content with your look? Like, walked away and be like, dang, I really brought it that time. It went perfectly. I peaked right on time.
When I was in the open as a pro,
Okay.
I liked that look the best.
Do
It
you,
was my biggest look.
so do you just feel like the pressure to keep under 212 was off so you could just kind of go after it?
Yes.
Eat? Yeah.
There was no scale factoring in at that point, and it was hometown, right? And they brought a pro show here, and I got to get on stage with these guys. No, and you know, Chad Nichols was in my Chad. He's like, you got to do it. It's hometown, Tom, and you come in condition. Who knows, right? This is Chad trying to get. He wants me in there, and I want to do an open.
Sure.
And I talked to Chris Aceto. I was like, Chris, he goes, do it. You know, you can't lose anything here, and you can actually see what you look like outside 212. The thing, and I love that's one of my fullest, complete looks because I knew I was going against those guys, and I thought, man, I mean, chasing more size on stage is this going to just make me look stupid? It didn't. It actually worked out. It was my best prep. From that end, keeping muscle and getting in shape at the condition. Like, I mean, I wasn't huge. I was 218, 217 on stage like that.
That's what I come in at.
Yeah,
Really, yeah.
And it was my best look for my frame. You know?
How tall are you?
About 5'7", 5'6". Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, between 5'6", 5'7".
Pretty big dude for it's a lot of muscle to carry that short.
So yeah, exactly. And I got up there, and I beat some mass monsters. But Victor Martinez, Johnny Jackson, John De La Rosa, that's Charles
Kevin
Griffin.
Jordan was there
Kevin
too,
Jordan was
right?
fifth. Yeah, he was in the top 5. And then there was another 212 guy in there right after that. It was great. That lineup was great because Chad brought it, and he did pay out better there, so people wanted to come. And honestly, just being on that stage and John Meadows did it. Man, rest in peace, man. He's a great man. being on the stage with those big guys was just fun to me. Like I got to go. Victor Martinez and me got to hit a front lat spread.
That's cool.
We got to go at it, and to be able that opportunity to step on stage with those guys, and we're all the same. But Victor and Johnny, I followed those guys, when I was younger, and just to be out there and realize, holy crap, these guys are on an open level, but they're like, man, you're 212 guy who can actually get it here, but I knew what it would keep taking me to stay in the open, and I knew I just wasn't going to be enough size, But I had to see what it looked like, and I want to see if I would beat some guys, And you do. I can be a couple guys, but that was all I needed to know. That wasn't just. I wanted to see if I could do the open, And people always talk about giant killers. Like, no, none of that meant anything to me. I just want to see what I look like next to these guys, and I'm a pro. I'm not scared of bodybuilders on stage. This is what we do. So I said, you have nothing to lose, and I get to actually bring more size to stage and see if I can condition. And it came in. It wasn't my most conditioned, but it was my most complete, look.
Right.
I mean, you have all different looks you like. I like my image. I like my USA looks better than some of our pro looks. Isn't that wild?
I'd say that about a handful of pros, though.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yes, you could. You could. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that show, I remember everybody was super hyped about the lighting.
It was one of the best lines ever. It was like the
That's
Night
what
of Champions.
Everybody was talking about, the lighting.
Night of Champions. Like they had the Night of Champions look, and it was the best lighting I've ever been under, too. I mean, USA's always had good lighting because they had when I did it, they had the black, drop, which you need, in my opinion. Sure. It's the best look you're going to get when you have just a black background because the contrast shows better. But in the Night of Champions, it was the lighting. And when you were up there, you were blinded. I've never been blinded, and it was like you were in a sauna. It was the hottest I've ever been on stage. I felt like I was melting up there. We were all just drenched because Chad had the lights right up, and he was, this is an amazing look. And it was the best. What was that? Midland Theater, right? Yeah. So I was at Midland. Yeah.
Okay.
Best lighting I've ever been under. And I was like, maybe that's why my look was more complete. But because it was that night. Did you compete there?
I did the WFF show there.
Oh, you did?
I did it fall. They had a WFF show a week after Mayhem.
Oh, did they? Okay.
And I got way, way too depleted for Mayhem. I was so upset about it. And someone was like, you should just do the show. And I had never even heard of WFF. And we all know WFF, it's not a bad organization. No. It's more for bikini and stuff like that.
Yeah, Paul Gillette, right? Yeah.
But in regards to bodybuilding, I think the top guys are okay. But I turned pro in my first show.
Yeah, I remember you went pro there with it.
Yeah,
yeah.
I filled out. I came on like 11 pounds heavier, and it looked a lot better. I just wish I would have hit that mark at Mayhem because I did Mayhem a handful of times.
Yeah, you have, yeah.
The show that you're talking about, you said that wasn't Night of Champions. What was it? The KC show with all the good lighting?
That was the Open Muscle Mayhem Pro. So.
Okay, did they have the amateur there?
Yeah, it was a pro AM. It was amateur and pro.
Yeah, I didn't do that one. So I remember I used to do it at the Foley Theater where you did too.
That's the old days.
Yeah, man, that's way back in the day.
People don't even remember the Follow Theater. Like you talking about it brings back great memories. Follow Theater was awesome.
After our first show, I found the back room that had the bathroom and the shower.
Yeah,
and I'd go beeline it straight to there, right?
Yeah.
And one year after I learned the system, I went straight back there. And a few other guys came back there as well, and we just set up shop. Rich Parsons was sitting back with me. And then Chad and then his handler, the guy who kind of runs the guys backstage.
Oh, yeah.
Come walking up.
Heath, yeah.
Yeah, come walking up with Flex. And they walk in. I had my headphones on. And they're like, all right, guys, you got to get out of here. And I was like, what? Yeah. This is the best spot. Because there's not a lot of room in the full
No, there wasn't. You had to find a spot and set up shop.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was with Mitchell Stats.
Yeah, right. I remember that.
Yeah, I mean he's a pro too. So
yep.
I mean very.
He beat me for.
Oh,
I think I took third. I think he took second.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, who beat you guys there?
I can't remember.
Right, because it was you two.
I think Rich.
Actually,
it was Rich.
It was Rich. Yeah, that's right.
But we were backstage in that room, and they're like, "All right, guys, get out." And so I was way back. It's not a big room. I was back in the corner. And everybody else shuffled out, and Flex goes, "He can stay." I was like. Yes,
that's a win.
Right on. Yeah. And so I'm like, they closed the door. It's just me and him in there. I'm like, dude, I'm not gonna bother you. You do your thing. And he's like, okay, I appreciate it. And then within 2 minutes, he's just going talking like a madman. It was so cool.
Before he was a Flex.
He was guest posing, right?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
and I remember shaking his hand. The thickest palms I've ever touched in my life, dude.
The most ridiculous calves, and you look down like, what? It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, he's a stud.
Yeah.
He was a cool guy to talk to, too. He was telling me, like, the weekend before, he was in Texas at Branch's house hog hunting. and how cool that was because he's Welsh, so they don't allow firearms.
Yeah, okay.
And so he's like, it's so badass to be able to hunt and this, that, and the other.
Freedom to do all that, yeah.
Yeah, he told me, he's like, I want you to come down and do my show in like a month. He's like, come off diet for a couple of weeks. If you win, I want you to come down and do my show. And after the show, I talked to him. He's like, did you win? I was like, no. He's like, all right. Well, and I was like, yep, I'm not going to be there. But he was a really cool guy. It was a cool experience for me because I got to hang out with Flex for almost 45 minutes, just he and I. And that's a memory that I'll always really look back on fondly, you know?
Like with Flex, Caveman Classic, he was a young man like I was, but he was small compared to what he is now, and they brought him down to guest post before anyone knew him. Like, this is Caveman Classic in, where was it? Close to St. Louis. You remember the Caveman? Did you ever do the Caveman? It used to be in a cave, guys. It was an unbelievable, it was an awesome NPC show. A lot of pros came from that in the old days. I mean, back in the day. I say old days, but back in the days, a lot of top guys came out of it. I mean, Brett Becker did all those shows, Tony, all those guys. And that's where I first met him, and he was maybe 185 pounds, 180 pounds, and he was actually guest poser. No, he wasn't guest posing. Don Long guest posed there. He was just signing autographs because he was the young gun from overseas, right? And he was just getting known then. And I was like, man, he's like my age, and I don't look like that right now because I was a middleweight back then as in the Caveman Classics. And I mean, the Caveman Classics back, when it was just bodybuilding and figure. That's it. Nothing else. Fitness,
good old days.
Yeah, good old days. There was like the middleweight classes had 15 to 20 people, and this is just an amateur show because that's all you had. The only option you had to do was bodybuilding, figure, or bodybuilding, right? For females too, and fitness was bigger back then as well too. So
yeah,
and it was like, man, you couldn't get away with a small class back in the days, and a lot of good guys came from that too, So I did the Caveman several times, and then that went away, and then Chad and Kim took over everything. Right?
Okay.
So
yeah, speaking of Chad and Kim shows, I should put out a disclaimer. I got DQ'd once.
I'm sorry, brother. I was there.
So I was a little. We talked about that with Brett Wilkins because he's working with Jack now.
Okay.
Helping promote those shows.
Yes. Okay.
And so, FYI, that podcast is going to come out. I tried not to be too bitter about it, but
that?
Yeah.
That's okay.
It came up. So
hey, but I was bitter about it because I remember seeing you and go, guys, we got I want him on. We need to get him on the stage, But at the time they had Judge Rick. There's no way it was going to happen with Rick, and I was like, well, he's the guy who needs to be competing in the overall against what's his name, and
I can't remember that kid's name. It's one of the guys that Brett used to work with.
Yeah, and I was just like, well, Matt would have been the guy because if it's hard to see that, like because I'm a competitor, so I'm on a judging panel. I'm like I feel like him. Though I'm like, no, that would kill me. I'm in shape. I'm ready to go, and I want to be that local guy and win because you go national level, right?
Yeah, I was already qualified for nationals, so I did nationals that year.
Yeah,
and I probably looked better before the All-Star.
Did you?
What a lot of people don't know is I was in the emergency room 36 hours before that show. I was
okay.
It's when I was working with Matt Porter.
Yeah,
rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Yes,
he had me on trace fats, like no fat in my diet, right?
Okay.
And it was, I can just remember eating rice and turkey like a madman. And it got to the point where my intestines started locking up. So every time I'd try and push food down, it was like the way the doctors, they described it, they said that's probably the closest thing you can feel to pregnancy as a man.
Wow.
Dude, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I tried to fight it for a few days, but every time my body would try and have a bowel movement or move anything in my stomach, I would be in like crazy pain to the point where I was vomiting because it was so painful. So I went to the ER. They gave me 3. So they do my blood work. Like, you're so dehydrated. I'm like, weird. I have no idea why. I'm only 2 days out from the show.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they gave me 3 liters of saline and a bunch of morphine. And I felt great. And then after that, I was like, well, I'm hella depleted, but I'm 24 hours out from the show. I'm going to still do this show. So I had a hell of a time going into that show. And then we get to that show.
I didn't even know that part. Yes.
Well, and Chad and Kim, they have put on some good show. I think they've gotten better. At that time, though, Kim had the athlete meeting an hour late.
Yeah.
And so, but my tan, so I had to wait, and then I went and got my tan, and so that's why I was late to stage. But I don't know. It was unfortunate. Luckily, I was already qualified.
Yes, and David Bay, the MC. I said we have to recognize him. You remember?
Dave is a stud.
Yeah, and he did. I'm like, and I said we really do. And David Bay, like, give it to, and like, no, he he's a national level contender, and that's why he's here. You know, he's already qualified, but he would have won the show.
Thank you.
So
I say that all the time. Well, whenever I talk about it, and I'll try not to talk about it too much more because it's the second podcast that's been brought up. But yeah, to hear you say that too, I appreciate
I'll
it.
100% say that because
you were a judge.
Yeah, I was a
at that
judge,
show.
and I wanted to see you on. I like to judge awesome bodybuilders. Like, you want to judge good bodybuilders, right? It's a privilege as a judge to judge a good bodybuilder on stage against another good bodybuilder. And the overall between you, I just know your shape would have shined, and I just know your structure. And look, I'm like, God, he's got to get up here, you know, because you need someone. You want it in the overall. You want someone to contend, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to just give away. And he would have been. And I'm a record. I'll say it. Matt would have won. You know, Matt was there already. He's in a better place in his bodybuilding than at that time the overall winner. And I remember who it is. You know,
Yeah.
but and it's the part that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Rules are rules. I mean, come on, people. This is still amateur level. We got to get to see he's a top quality bodybuilder. But you know, Rick was Rick at that time, and you know, head judge has that call, right? Too.
Sure.
And
well, at the end of the day, I should have found a way to be on stage.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I'll take responsibility.
Yeah,
for it.
because national level, they'll just like bye. They don't even care.
Yeah,
They don't
I
even
mean,
care.
to be honest with you, and Mike and I have talked about this before. You know, we're both believers. I did not make it because of lack of effort.
No.
I just don't think it was God's path for me. And if I would have gotten a little more momentum, I would have said, forget everything else. This is all I'm going to do.
Yep.
And I'm going to go even, like, I couldn't imagine turning pro because I would have dropped the hammer 10 times harder. You know what I mean? I would have foregone anything about health, anything, because this is what I thought I was supposed to do. So blessing in disguise, I'm able to still stay, like, I still got the career in fitness and bodybuilding. It's just gym ownership and, you know, running gyms with guys like this and having podcasts. So it was
a blessing in disguise.
It was a blessing. It wasn't something. It wasn't my game plan, but it turned out for me probably better. To be honest, because I think if I keep my foot on the gas, even now, I'm 40. If I wanted to train for 2 years, I could probably crack the pro if I kept hitting all the shows.
Absolutely. No, you could. Yeah.
But then what? You know what I mean? And, I don't know how much more my body can handle.
Yeah, like with the age and factoring all that in, I can tell you. I mean, it's tough.
Are you still competing?
I haven't in 2 years, and I'm downsized.
Okay.
For many reasons, but
so it hasn't left you haven't said no yet to it, but I feel the same way. It's like you never want to be out of striking distance, right?
Well, I mean, I could give you a good little. I mean, 2021, I'm on the indie stage, and I'm that's my most conditioned look to date. You know, I'm older, and for some reason, when you're older, conditions is much easier, in my opinion. My muscles dense. It's just harder, and you just look grainier. John Meadows all of us. It just happens. You get denser, and it's like, man, my conditioning just looks grainy now, and that's what it looked like there. I was pretty full there. I was eating like a madman for that. I mean, just because I was so dialed in. But it's going on that stage. You know, my daughter's out there. You know, my May's out, and they're watching the first pro show their daddy's doing. She doesn't know yet, but she's little and she's here, and that show, I've never actually told anyone this, was supposed to be my closure show. Like, it's good. This is my closure. I need some closure. It's time to love bodybuilding for the lifestyle of it and be the best dad possible, right? You know, but you can do both. Absolutely you can. But the man I am, it's tough for me because I think about longevity and all that as well, right? Mm-hmm. You know, and, you know, in order to keep going, because that look gave me a little fire, though, and like it was like, oh shit, now it's pulling, you know, like I'm on stage doing my routine for the night, you know, at the show, and I'm having a moment like inside. I don't even know what I'm doing on stage, you know, and it was according to everyone, it was my best routine ever. I couldn't even tell you what I did.
You just freestyled,
and it was, and I went with it. Like I went,
and
I said, I'm just gonna do the art of bodybuilding here. I'm gonna, but it was a mental thing up there. I was like, man, I'm in a different place right now. Like, I'm loving this, and nothing about the stage makes me nervous today. Like,
yeah,
it took a long time to get there, you know, to that point, right? And it was a moment where you're like, man, is this the last one? You know, like, do I gotta hang this up, you know, because I want to be like a top contender in that top 5 all the time, right? You know, because that show was Tonio and Tony, you know, he's in Tony Burton, Nathan Epler, John Jewett, you know, Brian Balzani knows, which he's not competing anymore in that wild. fifth, and I was, what was I there? Seventh? I was seventh or eighth there. No, eighth. I was eighth there. Yes, because what's his name beat me again. So I'm sick of losing to some people. But see, that's the competitor in me. And then I'm like, God, I'm actually, and that was a good sized show. I mean, Cody Montgomery was there, all of it. And I think he got 12th. I mean, he got 12th. So, and I got eighth, and a lot of good guys of that actually been on the Arnold show in Olympia. I beat that year. They were just like, why is this happening? But a lot of the up-and-comers I'm like, oh, God, these up-and-comers, can I hang with them? And I go, at 40 years old at that time, yeah, my physique's, condition. I can nail that. I'm pretty proportionate, symmetry's there. I have to get even bigger as a 212 guy, more dense, and, you got to push things, and that is something that I said as a perimeter when May was born, and I knew so. She's my number one. Got to make sure of that. And in bodybuilding, I love it, but at the same time, I have to be realistic and think about the afterlife of it.
Right.
And that's tough. I'm not gonna lie. When you hear Yates talk about it and all that, like, it's for real. It's the come down from not competing. It's
it's almost like a loss of identity.
Yes,
I dealt with it too, and I didn't get to your level, but you speak of Yates. It's like I respect him because he transitioned to a new person. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The saddest thing, in my opinion, is seeing the guy that the show's over for you, dude.
Yes,
and they're still the next one, and you're like, bro, you're like 50, and you've been riding this train for like 35 years, like. It's not going to happen.
Yes.
Everybody respects your love for the sport.
Yes.
But it's kind of sad because they still have all their eggs in that basket, right?
Yeah.
But
and at that point, I knew all my eggs weren't going to be in that basket anymore.
Right. Well, you're like me. It's hard if you're not going to look better every time. It's hard to do it. Right?
Yes, and to be better at that point, I've done the food to the maximum. Right. I know how to do all this. I understand at this point, and you know how to bodybuild. Right. If you don't, as a pro, yes, we all have coaches. That's just to guide us correctly, because sometimes we overthink or overcomplicate, and we see something different.
Mental cases.
It's a mental case thing, right? But at that point, if you're not a meathead about it and you actually love bodybuilding and understand and want to know the knowledge and learn it and just and experiment with everything possible, at that point you should know a lot, right? 20 years into bodybuilding, if I don't know much, it's pretty sad, know, and it means I just didn't care to know. And I was a guy in the trenches who wanted to know everything and figure it out. And when I did, it was, and I took that ride with Don Long and Aceto. Don would have been the guy to push me further, as a pro. Chris knew me as a man outside of bodybuilding, and he's like, Tom, do what you need to do.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And he wanted me to keep going. Like after Indy, I'm like, Chris, what now? He goes, what's the next show? You're right there now. I go, 40 years old. This is what and I said, Chris, right now I'm gonna go give my daughter a big hug. And I'm gonna, spend some time with her, and then I'm gonna look her in the eyes and see what's the best decision here. Because you got to be selfless a little bit as a dad, right?
Yeah.
And bodybuilding at times, you lose balance. Let's be honest, when you're deep into prep, it's somewhat selfish. By that time, preps were nothing to me. I understood them; they were easy.
Sure.
It's just you get tired. The hunger was never an issue. At that point, you just turn it off. If you've done this so long, you go numb to that, and you don't think like everyone. You don't break very easily. In the beginning, we all break, but by that time, you feel like, okay,
it's your job
get
at
it.
that point.
It's your job,
right?
yeah, and it's not that difficult. Yet it's difficult for most people, right? Because you're in the deep trenches, you're doing things that are pushing your body to the highest. Keep as much muscle as possible and lose as much skin as possible, body fat.
Yeah.
And it's an extreme thing, but it's at the same thing. It's a beautiful art to us, right? Everything that goes into it, like I say, we do everything out there to tear us, break down, do everything. We're hardcore. We push ourselves in that intensity, and then we go on stage and we do art, right?
Yeah.
It's like our game day is so much different than everyone else's game day.
Right.
And it's wild to me because I translate better to the like that, the process of, to getting to stage.
Same.
I love that part.
Same.
That was the part I enjoyed the most. Stage, for the longest time, was uncomfortable and uncomfortable at times. But the deeper I got into it, it just became very comfortable, and I realized I do love bodybuilding. If I can do it for the love of it, and because how to bodybuild, then it's going to be that much greater. But there's still, bodybuilding is extreme, and there's risks that you have to set perimeters, and some don't ever do that, right? And others do, and perimeters are what I set, and I haven't broke them. So I will say that I haven't, and there's a reason for that, and it's a personal, it's here,
right.
Like there's more to it. after bodybuilding, but you still can love the lifestyle. You can still love every bit of it. You just don't have to be at that level all the time, right?
Yeah.
It's tough.
Not to cut you off, but I feel like it takes a stronger man to know when to call it rather than to keep going, right? Because you spoke of Don Long. Mm-hmm. I remember last time I saw him guest pose, he was wearing like a fur to hide his port, right? Because he was like on dialysis.
Dialysis, yes.
But
and nothing against him. That to me.
That's hardcore.
I wouldn't have done it.
Don't get me wrong. That's
hardcore, but I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to tell you, no. Well, if you don't have no, I still wouldn't have done it because my mindset wasn't that. You get to that point. Okay, the USA's, I would say that was where my mindset was the deepest, right? You're like, I got to go deep here, I'm in it. Mm-hmm. I did my first national show, and, every class at the light heavy was a 40 plus. It was 38 to 45 plus every time, 2013, 14, and 15. And those were my most aggressive years, right? Because as a pro, they were less aggressive. I would 100% go on. Oh, yeah. The GoPro, I was more, I was like, you know what?
Sounds like basketball, college basketball compared to NBA, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I was like, man, I got to go invisible mode, robot here. Because when I did my first USAs and you get to top 5, you get 4th, and it fires you up. And then you get feedback, which they don't really give back. But Steve Weinberg was very good to me, and he's like, you have it. You have what it takes. And I'm like, oh, shit. Don't tell me that. Because I don't like to hear that. I want to be, I don't want to know I have okay genetics, good genetics, superior. I don't want to know that because the person who, I always say the person who asks, do I have good genetics, never has good genetics. The person who never asks if they have good genetics is usually the guy with the best genetics, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, gosh, okay. So I got to go all in here. 4th place, this is ridiculous. I can't handle it, right? I need to improve. So I came back in 2014, which I believe was one of my best looks. My tan was off. You can see the interview on RX Muscle. Dave Palomo calls it out the whole time. He looks green, but he would have won if he wasn't green. No, Caleb beat me, but it was probably one of my funner shows because at the USA's because there's 40 of us, right? And then I've never had that happen where they pulled everyone off and they say Caleb and Thomas Lenihan, come to the center. I'm like, finally, we're going to actually do some bodybuilding, like one-on-one, which I like that. Yeah. You level up. You get your mood, everything changes, and me and him were going at it. Like, he's from Louisiana, unbelievable human being, awesome guy. And we were going at it, and they were pushing us. I'm like, man, this is okay. Now I understand why you practice posing. And me and him were going, and we were nudging, and we were having fun. And we looked at him like, man, and we looked at each other and go, God, I just need a drink of water. We both did that, and they just kept pushing us round and round. And then we walk off stage, and we're like, man, we know we got to stay dry, and we just start chugging, just drinking. Because they pounded us with posing. And then we looked at each other, and he said, who do you think got it? I go, well, I got you, Caleb. And Caleb's like, no, I have you. And I go, what are you going to go do right now? Because, prejudging was on Friday in the USA's, and Saturday was finals in bodybuilding. So we are 2 days. You had to peak twice.
Right.
But usually it's done at prejudging, which we'll talk about if you want, 2015, which is the only time that's ever happened where it wasn't done. But so he's like, man, I'm going to go to the pool. I'm just going to jump to get this tan off, and we do this whole process again.
I bet the hotel loved that.
Yeah. And I go, man, I was going to go back to the room, and, at that time, Don was down there. So literally, Don, he asked you to come to the room all the time. I'm like, man, this is more exhausting than actual freaking. I was like, dang, so I constantly going back to the room, just monitoring me. And I'm like, to the point where he's like, you just can't stop eating. I'm like, yeah, I know. So it was to the point where after the show, like, I don't even care to eat because of everything I ate for that, just to keep that for 2 days. When I'm locked in and my condition's there and I'm dry and out still. Like, food, it's firing things up. I've only had one spill in my whole time, right? And I didn't spill there. I actually just kept getting better and better. But I was honestly stressed out because of the tan. Because everyone's like, you should never go and read afterwards, right? Any comments or anything out there. Because I didn't have social media big back in the day.
Did you do your own tan?
No. They did Masters tan there, and it was awful. And it was across the board, though. It was not only me, but seeing, and then I'm asking.
But
Caleb,
when you're one of the top guys, then you're the one that gets talked about, right?
Yeah, I know. And I go, Caleb, what'd you do? He goes, oh no. He goes, there's this lady, and I'm like, okay, I need that, And like, it was too late for me. I felt like, but I'm like, dude, don't get upset. Try to get your tan right. So I'm trying to get my tan fixed and it starts bubbling up. I'm like, okay, either my pH levels are all off, and I just cannot get this to stick. And I went to finals. I'm like, man, my color's going to defeat me. But no, let's not say that. Caleb beat me. He was the better bodybuilder. It was close. He was more aesthetic. I had more width, but he flowed very good, and he deserved it that day, Like I said, we kind of went in a pecking order, and then it was just like that, and that was a fun lineup. Like Sean Vasquez was in that lineup. You remember, Sean?
I don't remember Sean.
He was here. Now he owns Pride Food.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he did that show, and that was his first national show, and he got fourth, like I did, and he was thinking the same thing. But he was that backstage there because at that time, my ex-wife Andrea turned pro in women's physique.
That, yeah.
Yeah. So she turned pro, and I was one place away from it, so it was very close. We almost turned pro on the same night, which would have been kind of a wild thing, right? And
sure.
And that's when Palumbo interviewed us after, and he was just drilling me about my tan. I'm like, dude, he goes, man, you just got to keep going. You don't need any more size. I'm like, because I was second. Probably should have just called it and went to the off season, and my mind convinced me to do North Americans, which I wasn't really into it, wanting to do it, because I was a guy like, I got to come back better, but I did North Americans, and that was a punch to the gut, right? I top 5, 5th, not what I wanted. Tristan won that. Tristan's awesome. Jordan, Hadowitz,
Janowitz. Yeah, he was working with Matt at the same time. He and I both did nationals at the same time.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and he actually got second there, and then it took him forever after that to go pro. They pushed him back because then after that, I only had one more national show I could do, and I turned pro after that. I was like, man, he's up and coming. I was like, since he beat me there and all these guys beat me there, I'm a competitor. And nothing against him. I'm like, oh God, I hope they do the USAs. I want to redeem myself.
Yeah,
and
Were you light heavy there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Tristan was working with Hani at the time.
Hani.
That's when he took amateurs.
That's
Tristan trained up in Pennsylvania when I was up there at that time, so I saw him at a couple of the gyms.
That's true.
He was like 240 lean,
and
then Hani sucked him down all the way light heavy.
And
I was like, how is this guy doing this?
I remember seeing him in line, and usually in line everyone looks up close and looks great, but he does look different. I'm like, man, he's on point. This guy looks great, and I'm like, all right, let's go. Because I'm thinking I'm right there too, which we were. They missed. Oh God, who else was in it? Because Charles Griffin was a light heavyweight, and I think he got 6. He was in there too. Like that, so many guys are pro.
And he's still at it too.
Yeah, I know. And Tristan looks like granite, and then he did a couple 212s, and then he kind of just faded away, right? And now he's making a comeback, right? I see that with what's his name, Fackery. So that's awesome to see him. He's gonna be open. He'll be open, big boy. I mean, that guy has a physique. I don't know. He just stepped away, But that was a gut, punch. Like, oh man, I went to North America, and this is not what I wanted to happen. So, but I was like, nope, they're not pushing me out though, so that's a good sign. And Steve's like, man, you can't come in flat like that. I'm like, right. So I'm like, this is my issue right now. Like I'm still a conditioning guy. That's just a mindset thing. I always want to be. I just never want to be the guy who's not in shape, or looks like he's not in shape. That's something I want to. And it's happened once where I spilled, and it bothered the shit out of me. Right? It just didn't sit well with me. And that was as a pro. And I rolled the dice there, but it was bad circumstances. That's why it's too much stress at that point for that show. But I mean, like I said, then I come back to the USA's in 2015, and I said it's either this or I'm going big or going home right here. And I'm still deep in the trenches. I'm like, I'm gonna have the best off season, and I did. I had one of my best off seasons. I'm in my I think 240s at the time, and I was lean. Like I always stayed lean in the off season, mainly my legs. They always stayed like that, but. And I'm like, okay, this has got to translate to a little bit better on stage, because I'm still going to be a light heavyweight. I'm like, maybe I should be a heavyweight, but just a little lighter, right? Because it doesn't matter because, you can be 202 and be a guy who's 222, right? But I was sitting, I think, 201 peak week, and I'm like, oh, we're going to be fine. We'll get down to 198 and be good. And that's the first time where at prejudging, they brought out, like, in the first call, 8 of us. I'm like, okay, it's way too many of us. They were scrambling us around, and none of us had a clue. I'm like, man, what is going on? I knew I was somewhere there, but you had Addison, guys, go look him up, smallest waist. He's a pro classic now. Smallest waist, I mean, and he was the big talk. He's like, genetics, and he does. He's got great genetics. And then what's his name? I don't even want to. He's a pro too, but he was jimmied up everywhere. But either way, but he was in the mix. So and they didn't have a decision at finals, and they're like, guys, we actually have to rejudge this. So they had a call out of the first call out, but they only were 5 of us, and then it was just 3 of us. I'm like, they're rejudging this, and they you can go look at the scores. It's scratch, rejudge. It says it, and they put us in the quarter turns. Like, I got to nail it. Oh, by the way, I went back and redid my whole tan, got hooked up with that lady that they were talking about, and my tan was spot on. Like, this is when I had the most confidence. I said, I'm going to go in there and actually have the attitude where today's my day.
Yeah.
Because no one knew where we were at. And I mean, I was getting texts from Chad, and all those, Tony, and everybody saying, Tom, you're in the mix, but where, and they drilled us again. But after the quarter turns, they put me in the middle and said, I am not moving. Like, you tell yourself. And I was like, I don't stomp on stage. I don't do stuff like that. But today, I'm letting them know, like, show some personality, show that you want to be there, and outpose them at this point, because you have Addison, who has the smallest waist I've seen, and then you have, Jimmy Ups, and not talking bad, but yeah, whatever. And I don't even know how he got in the mix, but either way, that's just me being transparent. So and we were just going out, and I would not move the middle, and they started. Addison started getting tired, and he leaned onto me, and he fell into me. He's like, and he's a great human being. Just, he's very quiet too. He barely speaks, and I go, get up, man, let's do this. This is our time, and we were posing, and I was like, it's between me and him now. But they never moved me. They kept me between them, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna hold my poses until they put their poses down. And essentially, I hate to say it, that's the first time I felt like I battled it out till the end, and it actually worked out in my favor. I was 1, Addison was 2, and he was 3rd, and that's that mentality. Like, you don't think it translates, but that confidence at finals, being rejudged, redoing everything, my tan, everything, it mattered, because it was splitting hairs between me and him. I realized, and the only, like I said, his waist, his upper body, it was better than mine, it was so aesthetic and pretty, but in my lower body he didn't touch. But he looked like he did, and I knew that's why I got the edge. I was just more proportionate. Mm-hmm. If he had a half an inch more in his quads, it's like, whoa, we're trading spots, So that day, thickness and conditioning went over aesthetics and conditioning, right? And I was like, yes, that's what I want in bodybuilding, because I have good width for my size, so. And that was essentially, how it was done. I actually had to fight till the last moment for that pro card. It felt great. It was that moment where, like, it all came together, and then you go backstage, and that's your goal. Like we want to get that card, right? And it didn't, and I was not satisfied. It was. I was more. 2014. I was like, God, I love that look. Something weird about it. I'm like, man, this is awesome, but I'm not satisfied right now. I don't know why. I just had to swallow it up. I'm like, man. And then I'm like, well, I guess it's because you're about to start from the bottom up again.
Yeah.
And maybe that was it.
Sure.
And I'm like, does the game change even more there? And it can, if you let it, And like I said, I'm not going to take time off. They wanted me to go do the Tampa Pro 212 right away. I'm like, I should have done it. Biggest mistake I've made. Because I was in the moment. I'm in the light, right? I'm winning, and everyone who does the shows right after, the judges are like, oh,
sure,
you get pulled up, and Don's like, you actually can go do the Tampa, weighing right now what this is, and be top 5, and because of just the look, and I'm like, and at that time 212 was still coming up, right? We were getting more quality competitors, and he's like, you can get your top 5 there, you can get known right away, and at the time I just wanted to go home and relax and get to off season, eat some food, and enjoy this moment, and then I wanted to make sure I chose a pro debut that would challenge me. I didn't want an easy one. I wanted the New York Pro.
Nice.
Right? And that's when me and Don and me kind of ended, and then that's when me and Chris Aceto kind of became.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, you have a long history in the sport, plus you're a judge. What would you say to an uppercomer like Michael who's going for the pro card? Is there any advice you would say? Granted, our physiques are slightly different than his.
Yeah, exactly.
But What would you say to him? I mean,
well, I mean, we kind of chatted a little earlier in time, right? You know, more time usually builds better bodies if done correctly, and you, like you said, minimize, you know, the mistakes and learn from them. Like I said, and I know you are. Like I said, and don't chase size, chase muscle, right? Because you have size. So, and like I said, add like build a better body, make it more complete, right? I mean, like you said, you're hammering the lower body to make it complete. Yeah, your upper body is dominating, right? But your lower body, if it catches up and you present that package on stage, condition, yeah, you're going to be a pro. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this is the problem is being patient. I mean, I did it forever. Like before, I took my time. I didn't skip a lot of steps, and I harp on that on people like, let's not skip steps. That was my way. It doesn't mean you have to do it that way. I mean, you know, some people want to go very fast. That wasn't me.
Yeah.
I took my time and enjoyed every process. I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes on purpose because you're trial and error. You know, you're also you're in the trenches doing that too. But I say, like I said, consistency, discipline, and obviously a plan that makes sense, right? For you, you know, and I don't know who's helping you guide you, but whoever's your coach, or if you're coaching yourself, I don't know. Like, trust in that person, you know, if you believe that's they have the right set of eyes for you, you know. That's what it is to me. Coaches who have the right set of eyes, who know how to put it all together for that person, not really just take complete control, right? Because you know your body too, right? If you don't know your body, then it's insane to me because you don't get this big not knowing your body, right?
Right.
So it's them helping you put the pieces together, you know. The puzzle it's still in the making. Like you said, you have a ton of size, you know, and you're a mass monster. But make that mass monster look complete, right? And when you do that, and that usually is just time, right? How old are you?
35.
Oh shoot, yeah. I mean, say, and I turned pro a little bit before 35, like 34, I think 33, 34. So, but I've been bodybuilding for like at that point I already had a lot of bodybuilding. Like I've done it so long. Like I said, I was a middleweight for such a long time, and that's, you know, self-imposed. You know, just because I didn't, you know, you don't play with fire really that much, you know, and it's not that aggressive at that point. And I was just learning a lot about training and recovery at that point. You know, high volume versus moderate volume versus low volume, and I realized I'll be a middleweight for the rest of my life if I stay at high volume. You know, it just did nothing for me except keep me lean. No matter how much food I was shoveling, it was just like. It was defeating, you know, and that's how you learn. Like, you just constantly bring your volume down and figure out recovery rates. And I mean, like I said, I hooked up with John Meadows before John Meadows was John Meadows online. You know, he was actually, me and Brad Davis were like his testers for his training concepts back then. Right. Hell, I have them, man. His old school names, he would send them each week to me. He's like, Tom, I need you to test these out. And before Mountain Dog, it was right before Mountain Dog Express came. I was me and him were the first people on there, and Brad was too. And it was 4 days. I mean, but it was more recovery, but the training was volume still, and just intensifiers and I said to give it a full go, and I did. I learned a lot. My body benefited, but it wasn't exactly for me. Right. But it did. I learned a lot, you know. But I competed against John as a pro too. So that's and he like I said, all respect. The guy was a pioneer. Right? He's one of the pioneers, you know. But I didn't need to be pioneered to be able to beat his physique. Like, he never beat me on stage. That's okay, you know. But no. Yeah, I mean, respect him, and the knowledge he brought to the game is top level. But as a bodybuilder, he was a top bodybuilder. But I know I could beat him, and because I believed in mine, I just didn't push it out the way. You know, I'm like you. I'm quiet about stuff, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna learn from this and see what works best for me. When you go to Chris Aceto, if you don't know how to train, he says, go get out. You know, he don't want to talk to you. You know, like you're not a client for him. Chris Aceto is very selective, right? Because you need to know bodybuilding lingo. You have to understand it. His lingo, you guys would love his lingo. And just the way his eyes guide, you have to know how to bodybuild to work with him. If you don't, you're wasting his time, you know, and that's where I already figured out all the training at that point, you know, and you know, if anything, he would just tell me to, you know, recover better, you know, and he said, scale back your intensity. You're insane when you go like that, you know, because my body's metabolism just go, and sometimes I just wouldn't recover due to this. It was just everything was running so fast.
Yeah, you getting like that was me when I cut down for after the All Stars. I was 218 at 4% All-Stars, and I dropped down to 198 3 weeks later for Nationals, and I couldn't pull out of it.
Yeah.
I was in such a deficit.
Yeah, you can't pull out of it.
So, yeah, and it's everybody's different how they tolerate it, but you suck it down, it can take days to come out of that.
No, I know, days. I know, and I'm like, and people don't know that, you know. I'm like, no, everyone's different, you know, how they deplete and how they respond back from depleting, you know, and metabolically, like it just matters, and you learn all that. Like, so him, it was just like it was constant contact with him, you know, every single day you have to do updates, or you don't, you're gone. Every single morning. There's not a single morning in your prep you can skip, and it's just telling me to have more cheat meals half the time, because that was because my metabolism's like, Tom, I need you to go have 2 doubles and fries, you know. And I have my prep and plan, and people are like, well, this doesn't make sense. It makes sense for me. You know?
For your metabolism, your body type, I get it.
And you can get into absolute shit. You get it, I know. And I was like, I said, I was just talking to Chuck Sandow, you know, IFBB Pro Hall of Fame, you know, top guy, older now, and he's just like, Tom, it was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday prep, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, eat everything in sight. And you should go look at how shredded he was as a pro. Yeah. You know, and he's in the old days, Dexter Jackson, amateur day, you know, and me and him were talking just about it. He's like, Tom, you're just like that. And I go, yeah, I didn't know that. I would actually prefer just more of the actual, you know, carbohydrates that I'm using right now, or foods that I'm using, but I needed that jump in intake real quick, just to slow things down. But sometimes it doesn't slow it down, right? When you go right back to your prep diet, it speeds back up.
Yeah.
But that was just my metabolism at the time, you know. And guys, cardio was like my enemy.
Same.
So
yeah, there was preps I didn't do cardio. I don't know if I did. It was for like mental health, right?
Yeah, you're doing it just to feel better.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I kind of just want to do cardio just to feel better, like, and just really, you know, cool down here.
Sure.
But I didn't need it. Yeah. And when I did do it, I was like, man, 1 week of it, I'm like, wow, you can see the difference quick. I'm like, man, I didn't even. That's just body, and people are like, man, you had good genetics. No, that's a fast metabolism. That doesn't mean you have good genetics, and people don't realize that. Fast metabolisms are tough for people who want to gain size, right?
Yeah, it's body type, right? So you look at a treadmill, get shredded, whereas you see the guy across the room is doing an hour in the morning, hour at night, right? Killing himself.
And if that gets him in shape, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
See, the problem is people don't want to suffer like that, you know?
Right.
If you're doing no cardio, I guarantee you're suffering too when you're low body fat. It sucks, right? Low body fat is a suffering part. To get there, we all have different routes to get there, but it all feels very similar, right? Yeah. And I always say, just because you're doing all this cardio doesn't mean this person's, you know, it's just it hits everyone different. Yes, and some have to do 2 hours of cardio a day to get in shape, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And people say, you shouldn't have to do that much cardio. Oh, yeah, Big Rammy just did 3 hours of cardio a day and won Mr. Olympia. And I know that.
Yeah.
And then he went and trained. So people say, well, that's extreme. I go, and that's why he's Mr. Olympia, because you guys a lot of people don't want to do that suffering part. Because if you have clients that just, you need to push them there, you know, because they just don't have the metabolism, genetics, whatever it may be, anyone can get in shape. It's whether you want to go to that place or not. And it's, some people it's extremely difficult, and some it's not. But at the end of the day, when people say, you know, cardio versus no cardio, it depends on the person, right? Right. And the amount you need.
You said earlier that they told you should jump into the Tampa Pro right after you turn pro and you regret it. I know Michael and I have talked, and he's slowed down a little bit on when he wanted to go get on stage next for us, for work, but also to put on some size. And normally I wouldn't say this because I don't want to jinx anything, but I think we all know he's going to make it happen. So have you put a thought into what show you would do?
Probably another fall show next year.
But I mean, after you get your pro card, have you thought about the pro show? I guess you kind of want to focus on the one that's next.
Yeah. What's the lineup? Talk to us. What show in fall?
So whatever's in the fall, whether it's another Kansas City show.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got you.
Show, one of those.
You just want to go get out there and get that done.
Yeah, because I competed last year, took this year off, of course, to grow those areas, and then get back on stage next year. Okay. And that'll give me time, of course, to get us settled here, get this gym up to where we need to get it, and then
and then hit that show, and then a national show, right? What are we thinking of national level show?
Probably NPC Nationals.
Okay. Yeah.
That was the plan last year.
Yeah,
until Andrew showed up.
I know that. Yes, I know. Yes, and Andrew just turned pro, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But having those pictures next to him is very good for me because I'm able to see, okay, this is comparable, but this is not. So it was good to see somebody.
Yeah, you could compare it because now he's a pro, and you can say, well, yeah, he was legit. You know,
correct.
I look at it this way, Michael. You were the best one there. You have the most size, and in the open that matters, no matter what. It was just tying it all together, and obviously not carving up probably the way you did, right?
Right.
And that's okay. That's. I mean, like I said, sometimes you got to get your teeth. I mean, I got my teeth kicked in at a pro show, and it's an awful feeling. But no, it's the best feeling because then you put everything together even better.
For sure.
And I'm like, man, he's that's a pro physique up there. All he has to do is
he's already made a lot of progress.
Yeah, no, I can see, and that's going to translate over. Like your time in the trenches again, it's going to translate over. I know so because you're a guy who is about you think, you know. As we said, you like to put your hard cap on and learn and understand what's going on. Right. Yeah.
So Min has some pictures that he threw up. That we want to go through. We have probably 5 or 10 minutes left on this stuff, but I wanted to go through it, get your feedback on it. I have him go through and say, find some interesting photos so Thomas can explain what's going on here. What do we got here?
Oh, man, what was that? Was that New York Pro?
Is that when you were sponsored by Oreo?
Yeah. I mean, they should be calling me up, but they never did. But either way, I ate a lot of those. But when was that? That might have been Chicago Pro.
You got pretty good hair there. So
yeah, I was young. Yeah, my Lord. That's old school. Yeah. I never actually carved up on Oreos. It was more like
so. Is that before? Oh, that's off season there.
Yeah, that's one of my beginning of my big off seasons. I think I was 245 there.
Is that your heaviest off season?
Yeah.
Yeah. I could barely crack
no, this is very difficult. Like if I missed a meal, it's like I had to constantly.
Yeah, you miss a meal, you lose 2 pounds, right?
Yeah, and I was no matter what. Like it was eight feedings a day. I remember it was like mega 9,000 calories. It was a ridiculous amount of food. I mean, it was like meal part A and meal part B. Like it was an A and B of all my meals. So and it was a down long feeding we did.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, I love those. Those are one of my strongest days too. Like bodybuilding strength matters, and I enjoyed that part. Like I like to be a strong bodybuilder for bodybuilding, like not for powerlifting so much, but within in rep ranges. Like we could move weight in ranges instead of just moving from 1 to 3, right? And those were my strong. Those are the years I would see you in the gym. Yeah, God, those are good days, man.
Yes, sir.
We had some good old days. Water buffalo days. Way too much food and a lot of recovery.
Yeah,
I mean, training was the fun part.
So what did your training look like back then?
4 days.
4 days.
Yep.
4 days straight, and then
No, 4 days training split. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or something like that. And it was an all-in. I was a little nuts, a little crazy in those days because if you only have 4 days to train, you go all in, and it gets a little scary, at times, on leg day. So, so those were the high intense days, and anyone who said, you can train as smart as you want, but when you got to have a little bit of a, athletic mindset when you go in there. You got to bring an intensity level that you might not make it out that day, but you really will. That's the mentality I had. You have 4 days, you got to win, right? If you don't win those 4 days, it's not a good week. And I had 3 days to recover, so I knew that. Like, I knew I had to go all in for 4 days, and if I didn't, and I realized how much recovery factored in, mainly because everything you read from Yates and all that. But that's not the reason I went to lower volume. The reason I went to lower volume is because every time I lowered my volume from high volume, I put on more size, and it was good size. So I'm like, man, recovery really does matter. We just don't understand how it applies differently to everybody. And once you get that down, and it's mentally 4 days is not easy. I want to be in the gym much more than that,
right?
Because that's not science. That's just mentality, right? And I realized I had to think from this side of things in order to put on that size. And recovery was one of the components that I had to factor in big time at that point. Train aggressive and recover aggressive, right? So.
Thomas, we're gonna wrap up here, but what? So you're still prepping guys, right? Working at BFIT. Where can people get a hold of you?
For competition team, BFIT KC. Reach out to BFIT KC.
And then
me and Brian.
You're on Instagram, right? What's your handle on there?
Well, I've been hacked, so don't go to the hacked one. IFB. Oh gosh, I don't even know. What is it? IFBB Pro. Lenny Instagram because it was the other one. So guys, I didn't even try to get that back. So so that's where you can find me. But competition, lifestyle, BFIT KC. Me and Brian will take care of you. We want to bring the best to everyone.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do with the guys who come on the podcast, especially athletes, is get a training session with them. We didn't do that today, but maybe you and Brian could come back.
Let's do it.
And the 4 of us could train. That'd be badass.
I say we absolutely set that up and do it. I know Brian would love it, and we all would love it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It'd be fun to connect like that. And that's what we need to do. Yeah.
100%. Right on, dude. Thank you for coming.
Awesome. No problem. Thank you guys.